Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. This video is going to be all about n8n. What is n8n? No, really, what is n8n? What I mean is, what is the technical stack that makes up this engine that helps n8n run? We're going to break it apart piece by piece in this video. For those of you who are new to n8n, maybe you've just discovered it, you want to find out what it's all about, but you need to know a little bit more before you jump in the pool. Watch till the end of the video. I'm going to show you the fundamental things you need to know and have the knowledge of if you really want to be a master of this tool. This is the first in a new video series that I'm doing called n8n Building Blocks. So we have to start with the question, what is n8n? Who am I? I'm Scott Moore, and I've been working in the software industry for over 30 years. I'll tell you what you need to know, and I'll tell you even the stuff that some of the YouTuber tech bros won't. Low code doesn't mean non-technical, and it doesn't mean no thinking. Some of you have already started working with n8n, and you have found yourself a little overwhelmed because you didn't realize that. This video is also for you as well. I want you to succeed so you can make educated decisions. There's nothing wrong with starting something and failing. Fail fast, but fail forward. If I can help you avoid something obvious, then maybe this video is worth a few minutes of your time. So let's jump right in and answer the question, what is n8n from a technical stack point of view? At a high level, I'm going to tell you everything that you've probably already seen on the other YouTube channels. n8n is a low-code automation tool. Think of it like your virtual assistant that helps you automate things that you don't want to do repetitively over and over again. Anything to do with software. And we're finding new uses for it all the time. Instead of learning how to write code to accomplish a task, you're able to visually build a workflow and accomplish the same task by building your own engine. It's super visual and incredibly powerful. Imagine being able to set up these workflows and it runs every time perfectly. Every time you get a new email, it can handle your inbox for you. Every time you need to worry about uploading files or inserting something into a spreadsheet or working with a database, n8n can do all of that as well. In fact, some people are touting that it can get rid of a whole staff of people for a business. I'm not so sure that's the best use of this tool because maybe those people could do other things to progress the business forward. And that's where my perspective comes in. Although you will hear on a lot of channels how you can build nameless, faceless videos and get a TikTok channel earning $22 million a day, I'm focused on what makes my life easier and what makes my clients' lives easier with this. And n8n is a really great solution. So we're going to kind of strip away a little bit of the hype here and just get down to the nuts and bolts. In the software industry, automation has become key. An SRE, a site reliability engineer's job, is to primarily reduce toil in a company. n8n helps to do that without having to write a lot of code. It also allows you to build custom integrations with software that might not typically work together by being able to call the APIs directly and piece together what you need to accomplish the task at hand without having to figure out how to make some software talk to each other in other traditional ways. Let's take a deeper dive into the building blocks that make up n8n. First of all, let's talk about the core runtime, the engine that makes n8n possible, and that starts with something called Node.js. n8n is built on top of Node.js, and that makes perfect sense if you think about it. Node.js excels at I/O operations, which is exactly what you need when you're constantly making a bunch of API calls. When you're processing data, when you're handling webhooks, that's when Node.js does its thing the best. The entire backend of n8n runs on this JavaScript runtime, and that allows it to run thousands of concurrent workflow executions without even breaking a sweat. The choice of Node.js also means you have this vast ecosystem thanks to the Node Package Manager. When you're building integrations with over 400 different kinds of services, being able to pull in a specialized library can come in really handy. But let's talk about some of the other components. The entire code base is written in TypeScript, and that's a smart decision for a few different reasons. First of all, TypeScript provides type safety. That's crucial when you're dealing with different data flowing with different services that all expect different data structures. Secondly, TypeScript makes the whole code base more maintainable as it scales. With hundreds of integrations and a growing team of contributors, having strong types helps prevent bugs and makes onboarding new developers much easier. Then we have the interface, the user interface that you actually see when you're working with n8n. That is actually written in Vue.js. The visual node editor that you use to drag and drop workflow components, that's all Vue.js. Think about the complexity here. They've built a visual programming environment right within the browser. You've got drag and drop functionality, real-time connection between nodes, dynamic form generation for each node's configuration, live preview mode, and execution visualization. All of this is handled by Vue.js components working together. Let's talk about the database layer, and this is where it gets kind of clever. By default, n8n uses SQLITE as its database. This might surprise some of you in IT because you might be thinking, well, SQLITE, that's not even a real database. Why would we use that for a workflow platform? But it's actually brilliant for a few reasons. For development and small deployments, SQLITE is actually quite perfect. Its zero configuration, requires no database server, and in most cases performs very well. Now there is a hitch to that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it doesn't lock you into SQLITE. As your needs grow, you can migrate it over to a PostgreSQL database, for example. This gives the perfect benefits for a full-featured database. Better concurrency, more advanced features, and the ability to scale horizontally. The database stores everything. That means your workflows, your credentials, your execution history, and your user data. The database schema is designed to be agnostic, so that's what makes it easy to go between SQLite and PostgreSQL. Then you have the execution engine. When you trigger a workflow, the execution engine kicks in and it's responsible for the following: managing the execution queue, handling data flow between nodes, managing error handling and retries, processing webhooks, and scheduled triggers. The execution engine is designed to handle both asynchronous and synchronous operations. That means some nodes you have to wait for an API response while others can continue processing data. The engine manages all this complexities while maintaining the visual representation as you watch the workflow happen. You can add Redis as a caching layer in a messaging queue, and that enables features like distributed workflow execution, better performance with caching, and queue management for high volume situations. This is where you see n8n's enterprise-ready architecture. That means it can scale from a single SQLite database on your laptop to a distributed system handling thousands of workflows per hour. You can think of Node.js as the engine that's running the car, and Vue.js as the dashboard that you're looking at that's displaying kind of what's going on in the engine. And TypeScript is the language that is compiled into like the gasoline of the engine. I don't know if that's the best analogy, but by using TypeScript instead of JavaScript, it finds the errors at compile time instead of runtime, and it makes it safer to run. That's pretty much the gist of it. You know, TypeScript was created by Microsoft, and it's very, very popular these days, especially for running the front end pieces of SaaS applications where you still might run JavaScript on the back end. Where did Node.js come from? It's actually a pretty cool story. In about 2009, a guy named Ryan Dow was very frustrated with the way some of the current web servers, like Apache, were not handling a lot of users very efficiently, concurrently that is, and wanted to find a better way. So he looked at the V8 engine that actually powers the Chrome web browser and found that he could wrap that in a runtime and then have that talk directly to the operating system. So now you've got JavaScript that can talk as a server component in addition to the client side, and thus Node.js was born. And you have this now ecosystem where people began to make packages for this Node.js server with the Node package manager. That's where you see npm. And you can think of all of those packages kind of like the app store that you have on the Android phone or the Apple phone. And you can install whatever apps you want to at the time, bring them down, delete them, and use them for whatever purpose. It just makes your phone more powerful. And that's exactly what npm does with all these applications. So it sounds like it's the perfect world, right? So let's pause for a moment and think about the fact that anytime you choose any kind of tech stack, there's going to be disadvantages as well. Let's talk about that. So when we're talking about JavaScript, one thing you're going to have to deal with is complexity because of all of the dependencies that are there. When you run npm install and you install that package, there's a lot of little tiny bits and pieces that, like Lego pieces, that make up that application. And those little pieces may have even smaller pieces that make them up. And people talk about there's no deeper black hole than that of the NPM dependency library. You never know how far it's going to go. And because of that, there arises several issues like security issues. Let's say that you had a package that had 20 different dependencies and 2 of those suddenly had a security vulnerability. Well, now you have to know that you have to patch those dependencies because that affects not only that application, but if those dependencies are also used in other applications, there could be a security vulnerability there as well. If you're running something in production or in enterprise level software, that's where the security people really have to keep an eye on what's being installed and what's being used, even all of those dependencies, and that can get tedious. So dependencies is sort of a weakness there when we talk about Node.js. So another thing to keep in mind is that Node.js applications can be very memory hungry. So remember, we call a node in n8n one of those building blocks. Well, it's running Node.js and it's independently running that, right? But what if that becomes a complex piece that is more memory hungry than some of the others, and then you start combining different building blocks that become a memory hog? Don't be surprised if that little VPS server that you're hosting out there on the web for $2.99 a month runs out of RAM and starts causing other issues. Now, we talked about the fact earlier that single-threaded with Node.js is not necessarily a problem because it's event-driven and it doesn't block, which means when it's just doing heavy I/O, it's kind of like the waiter or waitress at a restaurant that's taking orders at a table. They don't have to take that one order, go back to the kitchen, put the ticket in, and wait for the food to actually come out before they go back to a table and serve somebody else. They can pass the ticket in, go see the other table, take the other order, and so that's where one waiter or waitress can service 10 tables within a couple of hours. That's how that works, and that is Node.js. However, it's really good for a lot of heavy I/O. But when you start dealing with workflows that have a lot of data access, or you start using local file access and things like that, that's a little bit different story. And if it gets really heavy, you can end up blocking some steps in a workflow because of that. And this is where, if you weren't going to use Node.js, what would you use? That's where, when you get away from the I/O piece of it and you need to have something multi-threaded, you need to build it in something like Go or C++ or Rust. What about the database downsize? Well, SQLITE is a good database to start with because of its simplicity. But as you fall in love with n8n and you build all these workflows, guess what? That file for SQLITE gets bigger and bigger. And you won't notice it until it gets about 4 to 5 gigs in size. And then all of a sudden, you're going to start having some errors and you won't know why. And it's because of SQLITE. So when you start finding out about this, you're going to want to have a plan in place to actually migrate over to another kind of database. And PostgreSQL is a perfect database to migrate over to. If you already know, if you've been using n8n for any length of time and you know you're going to stick with this for a while, I'd go ahead and make plans to do that. Now, you could do that several ways. You could put both of those components, n8n and PostgreSQL, on a single machine. They could both run within a Docker Compose, in their own containers in a Docker Compose executable. You could also install them both as binaries on a lab, Linux virtual machine if you wanted to. And then you can also split them apart. And that's actually what I do in my test lab. Is I have an n8n LXC container, which is kind of equivalent. It's a little bit different than a Docker container. We'll kind of talk about that in some other episodes. But we run that as a separate instance, and then we have PostgreSQL running on its own instance, as its own server as well. And that way you can actually increase resources like RAM and CPUs as you need to. One thing I have noticed, though, is PostgreSQL is very efficient, and with what little that I'm doing with it, I mean, I'm using maybe 2 CPUs, 2 gigs of RAM, and I'm not even using more than maybe 20% of the resources of that. So far, as we start pushing it, I'll be able to bring it out. But I actually did, within 3 weeks, started having errors because of SQLITE, and I had to do that migration process. We're going to be bringing that out in future episodes, as well as on my membership website as well. A whole guide about what I had to do to move over from SQLITE to PostgreSQL, and hopefully help you do that faster as well. I think thinking about n8n from a performance engineering standpoint, at least part of the time, because that's my background, has helped me understand some of the limitations of these components and to prepare for that ahead of time. And that's something if you have not, most people, most even developers don't even think about the performance aspect of it until it's almost too late. So thinking about it now and getting on that trail early of what am I going to do when I reach this particular resource limitation, that's a good thing to have in your planning documentation. Let's talk about how n8n handles those 400 plus integrations I just mentioned. Each integration is essentially a Node.js module that has to follow n8n's specification. This modular approach means new integrations can be added without touching the core database, community contributors can build and share custom nodes, and each integration is isolated, so bugs that are in one don't affect others. This node system is incredibly flexible. You can write custom JavaScript or Python code directly in a workflow, import NPM packages, and even build your own custom node. From a security perspective, n8n's architecture is designed with self-hosting in mind. Your data never has to leave your infrastructure. Credentials are encrypted in the database, and the entire system can be air-gapped if needed. It's worth mentioning n8n's licensing model because that affects how the code is structured. It's considered fair code, which means the source code is available for you to look at, but it's not fully open source. This means you can see all of the code and you can modify it for your own needs and self-host it, but there are restrictions on commercial use without a license. This licensing model allows n8n to run a sustainable business while still making the code transparent and modifiable. From a performance engineering standpoint, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. Node.js handles a lot of concurrent I/O efficiently. Vue.js is a very responsive UI. TypeScript finds errors at compile time rather than runtime, and the database scales from SQLITE to Postgres. One big advantage that you have going with n8n over other automation solutions is its flexibility of where you install it. So you can use the Node Package Manager to install it on your local machine. You can run it as a containerized application with Docker. You can use Docker Compose, or you could even use Kubernetes. The quickest and easiest way to get signed up and started is to use the fully managed cloud version of n8n. And if you click the link that's in the description of this video, that'll take you there and get you signed up right away. And should you sign up for a paid plan, I'm an affiliate with n8n, and I will get a small commission at no extra cost to you, and it supports the channel and my content. So thank you for those of you who have done that. Now we need to talk about the fundamental things you need to know as a beginner before you even take your first steps into using the tool. If I were watching a video like this, this is the kind of stuff I would have wanted to know. So what is it that you need to know? Number one, you need to understand what JSON is. That's the JavaScript object notation. It's really a long word for how JavaScript is formatted and how it's expected to be received as a data format. You need to know object notation and array structures, how to access nested properties, the difference between numbers, strings, and booleans in JSON, how arrays work, and how to iterate through them. If you don't understand JSON, you're going to be completely lost when you start working with n8n because everything flows through your workflow in that format. So I've made sure to put links in the description and also in my detailed guide of courses that you can take online on YouTube or websites that you can reference to learn more about JSON specifically. The next thing is you need to understand basic JavaScript programming. Wait, Scott. This is supposed to be a no-code, low-code solution, and all the other people are telling me, I did it without any code. Well, the more complex your workflows get, you're going to have to deal with code at some point in time. Now, you may be going to a generative AI solution like ChatGPT or Claude to get the solution that you need, or maybe it helps you write the code. But all I'm saying is, as you move along and you progress, you're going to be looking at code more and more. And there's actually a code node in n8n for a reason. Sometimes that's what you need to get you through to the next step. The more you understand the basics of JavaScript and what it's doing in that code, the faster you'll be able to complete your task, the faster you're going to be a master of n8n. So here's the things you need to understand. Variables and data types, basic control structures like if statements and loops, functions and how they work, string manipulations, and basic array methods, and how to debug some JavaScript errors. The expression editor in n8n uses JavaScript syntax, so yes, this is essential knowledge even for simple data transformations. Next, you need to understand some fundamental things about the HTTP protocol. Maybe up to now, all you've ever done is use a browser and you put a URL or a link up in that top bar, www.whatever.com, and that's the length of your knowledge of the HTTP protocol. You need to learn the basics of what's happening when you press that button to go to a web page. You're sending a request, you're receiving a response. API calls run on the HTTP protocol. So when you're calling the different services, this is what's happening. You absolutely must understand HTTP verbs like get, post, put, delete. You need to understand HTTP status codes. What's a 404? What's a 503? What's a 302? What do those numbers mean? You'll need to understand what a header is and how to use authentication methods within them. You'll need to understand request and response body structures. You'll need to understand rate limiting and error handling. Many of an n8n operator has been caught with all of a sudden nothing works, but I didn't change anything in my workflow. And it's because the external service was rate limiting you, saying, whoa, buddy, you're calling me way too much. And if you don't understand what that is, you'll start changing things around and you'll make things worse. One of the things you may have noticed watching other people show you how to do workflows is that they tell you you're going to need to create a credential. This has to do with authentication and authorization. You'll probably see them use terms like OAuth. You'll be using tokens. You'll be using basic authentication, header authentication. You're going to be grabbing API keys that you can use that are basically like passwords that you're passing back and forth to these services. If you don't understand what these mean, you're probably going to end up with hours of frustration. So understand the different methods for authenticating to services and why you need those permissions. Finally, you really need to understand something about data and how it's being transformed in n8n. During the course of a workflow, you may be mapping data from one node to another. You may be modifying that data, filtering data out, sorting data, aggregating the information into one unit, splitting them back out, converting data, as well as error handling when the data that's expected isn't there. These things that I've mentioned are really essential. Some of the most common pitfalls that new n8n users experience is they're expecting magic. They think they're going to install this tool, they're going to copy or import a JSON file from the greatest YouTuber that ever existed, and they think they're just going to make a couple of modifications, push play, it's going to create this great video, and their TikTok channel is going to blow up and they're going to be rich. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I hate to break that to you. If you don't understand how data flows between nodes and what kind of data format is expected, then you will get unexpected errors when the use case slightly changes. And sometimes people just make things overcomplicated when there should be a simple workflow and they've got 10 times the number of nodes they should. And I see that a lot on the YouTube channels today. Find the simplest solution possible and start there. Once you start learning these fundamental things that I've already talked about, don't forget to check out n8n's own documentation. And there's a lot of information on the community forums as well. I've learned a lot myself. There's great example workflows that you can check out and investigate how you might be able to utilize that in your workflow as well. Just don't expect to copy and paste everything and it just work perfectly out of the box. Start with something simple, a couple of services that you know that you'll use all the time. Practice transforming data from one format into another, and is it looking like what you expected? You're going to have to learn to read API documentation as well. You watch all these videos and they tell you, you need to sign up for this website, you need to go get this API key, and then you need to format it this way. And you may have to go and read that API documentation to find out exactly how to format it the way it is intended for your use. And it may change over time. Those documents may be updated. So you need to understand what that format is for that API. If you're going to be dealing with storing things in a database, you need to understand a little bit about how a database works. You should probably study up on what a webhook is and how that's different from polling. You should understand what cron expressions are for scheduling. And if you plan to self-host, definitely you should understand what Docker is and how to use it. Using n8n won't make you understand APIs any better. It won't teach you how to do data validation. It won't debug your logic errors for you. Those are fundamental skills you need to develop And while yes, you can get some help from Uncle GPT, I've had many sessions in the past where it led me down a rabbit hole and I ended up having to redo the whole thing because it basically didn't understand what I was asking it. The good news is that once you do get these basics down, n8n becomes a very powerful tool for you to use. You could build complex workflows in reality that would take you weeks. You could probably do it in hours. But without these fundamentals, you're going to be constantly frustrated for a while and your workflows are going to be pretty unstable. As mentioned, I'll put in as many links as I can to lead you to some other resources where you can learn this stuff, but you're going to have to put some time in. So there you have it, a technical rundown of n8n's architecture, which, when you understand it, gives you power, flexibility, and freedom, and delivers on the low-code promise. So that's it for this video in the n8n building block series. In our next video, we'll talk about how you can install and deploy n8n for free in your own hosting environment, and we've got several ways to do that. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'm easy to find. I'm on most social media networks. You can find me at smcjournal.com, LinkedIn, Twitter X, Instagram, and other places. I'm also available by email if you write to me at heyscott@smcjournal.com. And you can also reach me in my community at scottmoore.consulting. If you like this video content, it'd be great if you could subscribe to the video and let me know the kinds of things that you'd like to see. What are some other videos that I can make for you about n8n that would help you in your journey and get you there faster? Until next time, this is Scott Moore saying thanks for joining my channel, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.